Hi, welcome back to Books on the Go. I'm Anna and Happy New Year. I'm here with a book haul today. I haven't posted for a while, which apologies. And so let's just say goodbye to 2023. Goodbye to all the books that I haven't reviewed or wrapped up on the channel. I have posted haphazard reviews on Litsy if you follow me there, or sometimes Instagram. So you can check up on my reading there, any reviews or any recommendations. And on the podcast, Annie and I did a best of at the end of the year, and also some holiday reading recommendations. But let's do a book haul. So these are books that I have, one or two that I bought and been gifted for over Christmas and birthday, which was late December. And as you may know, if you've been following the channel, last year I tried not to buy any books or many books other than the ones I had to read for book clubs and so on, because I was reading through my TBR. And I will see if I can insert a photo maybe at the end of this video of the reduced TBR. So I was quite successful. I haven't completely finished reading every single book, but I've only got about 4 or 5 to go, which I'm very happy about. But of course, I've undone all the good work and now added to it with these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books, plus some secondhand paperbacks, which I'll show you, but never mind. So that's all part of the fun. So the first one, which I actually bought, is The MAID by Nita Prose. And I'm just going to move this because I think you can't see it. Is that better? And this one I had heard really good things about. So that was one of the reasons that I wanted to read it. And also it's set in a grand or a luxury hotel. And I really love books set in beautiful hotels. That's one of my favorite settings. So that drew me to it. But it's about a maid, as the title suggests, called Molly, who finds a dead hotel guest one day, and then I think sets out to solve the mystery. And she's very well placed because she goes in and cleans all of the rooms each day. She knows the secrets that the hotel guests might be keeping. So it's a great premise, and I think it's one of the books. There's been a trend, from what I can tell, of not unconventional, maybe we say unconventional, but narrators or protagonists of crime fiction who are not necessarily police, but looking at it from a different perspective. And this is, I think, one of those, or one of the front runners of those books. So, and she's also I've just read a couple of pages, and she finds it hard to understand people's emotions, or hard to read faces and sort of really understand what people mean when they laugh, but they're not really finding something funny, for example. So she might be a little bit on the spectrum. And I think Louise Candlish said she's the most winning narrator since Eleanor Oliphant. So it has a feel along those lines in terms of her voice and her way of approaching the world. So quite engaging so far, and just looks like a good, fun read. So that's The MAID, and I'm wanting to read more crime this year. So you'll see that as we go through the book haul. The next one was The Vulnerables by Sigrid Nunez, and I don't even need to know what it's about. I love Sigrid Nunez, so I'll pick up any new release of hers. I loved Annie and I did The Friend on the podcast, and I think What Are You Going Through was the most recent one of hers that I've read. And she just has a wonderful, captivating voice and style and intelligence. It's intelligent, but very accessible and comforting to read, her voice. I don't know how she does that, or why that is, but I'm looking forward to this. It was also recommended by, I think it's Clara on Colour Me Lovely, which is a fantastic, she has a great Instagram, and she does book TikToks occasionally, which I'm not on TikTok, but I've seen her through Instagram, and she has a podcast called, I think, One More Chapter, and she recommended this one. It could even be set during COVID. The premise is 3 characters thrown together in a Manhattan apartment. One is a solitary writer, one is a Gen Z college dropout, and the other one is a parrot, which might explain this fantastic cover. So again, I don't need to know anymore. It's Sigrid Nunez. I'm looking forward to that one. And I think Clara said it was a really comforting read, so that sounds good. The next one I asked for and was happily given for Christmas, 8 Detectives by Alex Pavesi. And this was recommended by Miranda Duess on a podcast. I think she said it was good, fun, brainy, bloodless crime. And it is, in the sense that it's a murder mystery in the classic style, and it's all about solving the puzzle. And the violence happens off the page. Although I have to say there were some disturbing scenes in this book, I must say, Alex. The setup is that the author is also a mathematician or has written a maths doctorate or thesis about how maths interacts with murder mysteries or crime novels. And the author is also, I think, a mathematician. I hope I've got that right. I'll have to put the glasses on for this because the eyesight has gone downhill. It used to be the 1 magnification and now it's the 1.5. Yes, he's a former bookseller and software engineer with a PhD in mathematics. So I've just finished this one last week. We were down at the beach house. We've got summer holidays here, although the summer has been quite overcast, I must say, in Adelaide. But it didn't quite work for me, but I can see why it's been getting such rave reviews and people saying it's very inventive, very fun, and it's clever. So I do see that, and it's a really fun setup. So the author in the book, the main character is an editor who's come to interview an author to publish his 7 short stories that he wrote, which were all murder mysteries, and he wrote a maths thesis about the mathematical formulas involved in crime novels or in murder mysteries. Each of the 7 stories illustrates one of his rules. So he has taken the idea of a murder mystery novel and broken it down into mathematical concepts, and there's Venn diagrams, and I'm really there for that. I love maths. I get it. I can be maths nerdy. So I find that a fun premise, and you can unpick a murder mystery and say, well, how many suspects does it have? How many victims? How many, you can have one that's got 1 suspect, 5 suspects and 1 victim and a detective, for example, or you might have 2 suspects and 5 victims, or, you can have so many permutations of it. So I see that. What I found not as satisfying was it's not how I like to read a murder mystery. In other words, it took the fun out of it for me. And being short stories, you're not really invested in the characters, and they're very much there as a tool to display this rule. And the stories in and of themselves are okay. They're often riffs on famous murder mysteries that you would know of. So that, again, is very, I don't want to say derivative because he's doing that knowingly, but it's not as good as reading, the original as a novel, I suppose. So I didn't get that satisfaction of the main character that you're following through a novel, wanting to know what happens. There wasn't really suspense for me because they're so short. And then there's a twist at the end, which is clever, but I wasn't invested enough in the characters, the 2 main characters, because you have to wait so long each time. You have to read the whole short story before you see them again. So you're not really with them enough to really care what happens. So yes, it didn't quite work for me, but a very clever setup. I think if you liked Stuart Turton's novel, which is The 7 Deaths, not The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hugo, The 7 Deaths of, is it Evelyn Hugo? I get mixed up with The 7 Marriages. But the one that Stuart Turton wrote, that he says he plotted out in an Excel spreadsheet, and it was very done to a formula, and some people really, really loved that, whereas I found it a bit clunky. So I think if you loved Stuart Turton, you would really get on with this one, and I think it's a great premise for a novel. So that's 8 Detectives. This one was recommended on a podcast by Alex Hay, and it's called The Square of Sevens by Laura Shepherd Robinson. I don't know if you can see that there. And it sounds like a really good, sumptuous, sweeping novel that I can be swept away in. It's set in the 1700s, and I think it's based on not a magician, so based in Cornwall, and a fortune teller. That's right. A young girl called Red is a fortune teller, and that's how she makes her living with her father. And the method is called the Square of Sevens. And then their luck sours. Her father befriends a gentleman scholar who offers him an ancient document containing the secret of the Square of Sevens in exchange for his promise to take Red into his care. So then she's raised as a lady in Bath, and her skills are a delight in polite society, but she can't ignore the questions: who was her mother? How did she die? Who are the enemies that her father always feared would find him? So then it's a mystery, which she then goes from Bath to London, and the grand houses of two of the most powerful families in England, but others have embarked on their own investigations to locate the stolen secret of the Square of Sevens, and then she's in danger. This sounds really fun, and it reminds me of, the similar... Well, it doesn't sound similar at all, but the Whalebone Theatre, which I read sort of this time last year, which was, again, just a really good, old-fashioned, great story, set in Cornwall, although this one travels a bit more maybe. And the other one that it made me think of, perhaps because it's historical fiction, was the one by Imogen Hermes Gower, which I've forgotten the name of, but it was a debut novel a few years ago, set in, I want to say, the 17 or 1800s, and it might have that feel to it. So I don't know, haven't started it. Let me know if you've read it, but it's quite chunky, but it sounds like it will be a really engaging read and has had great reviews. The next book was so I'm really adding to my TBR here, The Death of a Lesser God by Vaseem Khan, which is a crime novel, I think historical, set in India in the 1950s, I want to say. Yes, Bombay, 1950, and I've read one or two of Vaseem Khan's earlier books, and I love his style. It's a crime, this is a different series, but crime with a really light touch, a good sense of humour, and he straddles India, but also the English in India, and he has had experience in both of those. He's lived in India and lived in Scotland, so he's got a great perspective, lived experience, and just a great tone and style, and then the mystery to keep you guessing. So I have high expectations. This one, I don't know if it was this particular book, but he's won a CWA Historical Dagger and he's a Theakston Crime Novel of the Year nominee. And this one's been described as brilliant by Anne Cleeves and beautifully written by Peter May, so that sounds fantastic. That's Death of a Lesser God, so stay tuned. And then two who are authors coming to Adelaide Writers' Week in March. One is Richard Flanagan, Question 7, his new novel. I don't need to know anything about it because I love Richard Flanagan, and anything he writes is so engaging, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. And in fact, that is a live question with this one, because when I just had a look at the blurb, it's set partly in Japan, partly in Tasmania, and involves a prisoner of war and then a river in Tasmania, but it refers to Richard Flanagan's father, who was a prisoner of war in Japan. And then there's a character called Flanagan, and I'm now thinking, is it fiction or non-fiction? Is it autobiographical? And then the quote, which I've forgotten what you call these, but the quote on the front page, there's a name for these, but you know what I mean. The quote says, "The author has not given his effort here the benefit of knowing whether it is history, autobiography, gazetteer, tragedy, romance, almanac, melodrama, or fantasy. It may be myriad, it may not. The question is put, but where is the answer?" That is the Hobart Town Mercury reviewing Moby Dick. So he's teasing us, definitely, but with Richard Flanagan, anything he writes, he's such a great storyteller. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'll report back what we think. It might be a bit like the Chris Cholkas 7.5, which was a novel but had echoes of the author himself, in that the main character was an author who was at a beach house trying to write a novel, and it went into the process of him doing that. So it did have that feel of autobiography, but it didn't bother me. Sometimes that does bother me, but it didn't in that case. And I'm wondering if this does a similar thing where it merges the two, and then you have to not worry about which is which. So that is question 7, which is a question. And then the next one is Emperor of Rome by Mary Beard. So just a small light read. And I love Mary Beard. I've heard her speak, and I'm really excited. She's coming to Adelaide Writers Week. And at the moment on my TBR, which I am partway through, is SPQR, which is about the Roman Empire, which I'm interested in. I never studied it at school, and I feel that that I should know a bit more about it. So this, I guess, follows on from that, but it's going into the emperors themselves and how they ruled. And it's interesting to look at it in light of, I suppose, current day politics. So there's a chapter on succession planning, for example, and then you think about the show Succession and the Murdoch Empire and all of those questions which these emperors faced in their own context. But Mary Beard, even though some of this can be quite dry and it's very remote, I find ancient history really remote and sometimes hard to grapple with, but Mary Beard is so engaging and she really brings it to life. So I will look forward to reading this once I've finished SPQR. So that will be another chunky one. And then I went to a secondhand bookshop and did a binge on classic crime. So I won't go through these in too much detail, but just look at these covers. Evil Under the Sun by Agatha Christie, which I finished, was absolutely brilliant. It is one of her best, and Sophie Hannah recommended that. Dorothy L. Sayers, which this one's called Striding Folly, and look at the snake. So I've just realised that's perfect for the Savage book prompts, which Simon Savage and his mother Louise Savage are running. So there's one that has a snake on the cover, perfect, tick. I've done that one. This is 3 short stories featuring Peter Wimsey. Really easy reading, really fun, and I can recommend. Josephine Tay I had not read before, and To Love and Be Wise, I really loved this. It's got a detective, I think it's Alan Grant, Alan Grant. Hollywood star photographer Leslie Searle disappears. It's set in a remote English village, and he comes to the village and has to solve the mystery, but it's got the most wonderful characters, and he's a really lovely, engaging protagonist. He's very intelligent, he's urbane, he's really interesting. I enjoyed being in his company. It reminded me a little bit of the vibe of Louise Penny or Donna Leon in terms of Commissario Brunetti or Detective Gamache. He's more in that style. So really enjoyed that, and there's a great sense of humour there, and that's not news to anybody because she's one of the classic authors. And then just look at these covers. This is Ngaio Marsh, who I've never read. Look at this. I don't want to see feet on a book cover, but I just had to get it anyway. And this is a bookmark that my daughter gave me for Christmas. Isn't that gorgeous? So I'm partway through Final Curtain at the moment. And then look at this cover. Oh my gosh. Clutch of Constables, which is also recommended. And then Death at the Dolphin by Ngaio Marsh. So again, very interesting. This is an early edition, I think. So they are sort of golden age detective fiction. I haven't read Ngaio Marsh before, or Josephine Tay. I had read one of Dorothy L. Sayers, and Annie, my co-host on the podcast, always recommends her. And Agatha Christie, I'm still working my way through her books, of which there are so many. It's daunting sometimes. So there we are. That is a rather large book haul, and I think I'm going to have the same issue with the TBR. I'll have to really rein in the book buying this for the next few months because I'm going to be busy. But let me know what you've been reading, and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.